Hi, everyone. Welcome to the second breakout session where we have Janene Cullen, who will be speaking on how native plants can combat climate chaos. I'm Jared, your moderator. I'm a volunteer for Prince William County Alliance at the Merrimack Farm. And today, like I said, Janene is a satellite engineer working for the Aerospace Corporation. In her spare time, she has been a Prince William Master Gardener since 2006 and an Audubon ambassador since 2011 and a Virginia tree steward since 2015. In 2020, she also became a certified climate realty leader. She's looking forward to the time when she can spend many more hours on environmental sustainability projects. I think we're gonna save most of the questions until after the presentation. In order for everyone to clearly hear the questions being asked, I ask that you raise your hand, and depending on how far back you are in the room, to either speak up loud so the mic can pick it up, or come to the front and ask. And without further ado, I'll let Janene get started.
Can you put it in full screen?
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, thank you all for coming today, especially on this topic. I know a lot of times we talk about climate change. It's a big, very scary global topic, and it is. So a lot of times you just don't want to talk about it. You kind of get the feeling of what can I do about this? It's such a global problem. But I'm here. Good news today. It's going to be a good news briefing. No gloom and doom. A little bit in the beginning, but then at the end we'll do some good news. There are things that each and every one of us can do to address climate change, particularly since we're gardeners. I mean, there's probably things you're doing right now that will address how to try to heal our planet as we go forward. The first part of this briefing is going to be kind of a refresher of climate change and what it's doing to our planet, and then the back part will be agriculture, plants, and things that we can do. So go ahead. So last year, the United Nations had a meeting of the interplanetary, where's the title? There we go. Intergovernmental panel on climate change. And this is a statement they came up with. This is about 150 countries. So the fact that you can get 150 different countries to agree on anything is amazing. But they made the statement that climate change is a threat to human beings and to our planet. And things that we are doing today will have impacts for thousands of years. Next slide. Last year, we also had the United Nations COP28. That's the Conference of Parties. So it's held in Dubai. This is also a United Nations meeting, but it's a higher level. So heads of state go to this meeting. We had Vice President Kamala Harris attend for the United States. The objective of this particular COP was for all the countries that are participating, this is about 180, to state how they are doing on the status of the 2015 Paris Agreement. So the 2015 Paris Agreement was when all the countries agreed we cannot let our planet go above 2 degrees Celsius increase. And we're going to try to hold it at 1.8. The United States was a big contributor to the crafting of that agreement. As you guys probably know, in 2016, when the Trump administration came in, they pulled us immediately out of this agreement. 2020, when the Biden administration came in, they put us right back in. So we lost a couple of years, but I'll show you the chart we're doing. Okay, a lot of the big organizations in the United States and in states like California and New York, they decided to stay at those, whatever agreement they had made to go into the 2015, they agreed to it. They continued on, they didn't pull themselves out. So we have made some good progress. There's a little bit of controversy on this one last year because the president was a sultan, and he was also the CEO of several, state-run energy companies. So how can he be kind of unbiased on it? But it worked out. I don't know if anybody followed you. I watched it on Bloomberg News that whole week, and there were a lot of controversies about who was leading, but it worked. All right, next slide. So just kind of a refresher. What is climate change? Again, you guys probably already know this. So we get heat and energy from the sun. So see that blue circle around our globe? That's our outer atmosphere. That protects us. lets in just enough heat and just enough heat back out and lets in the heat and energy. We are the only planet in our solar system that has that outer atmosphere. So it protects us from the extreme heat and cold as we rotate around, as you know, the planets rotate around the sun. Next slide. As you see that red line, when that heat and energy hits the earth, just enough of it, it gets re-released back out into space. You probably heard the Goldilocks, the Earth is the Goldilocks planet. Again, that our outer atmosphere protects us, so just enough, just hot enough, just cold enough. Next slide. Some of that heat, as we said, back hits our outer atmosphere and comes back down to Earth, again, keeping us in the just right temperature for humans, for plants, for our planet. But watch that blue circle. Next slide. When you have greenhouse gases, it effectively thickens that outer atmosphere. So think of that outer atmosphere kind of like a loose weave blanket just protecting us. When you get when you get this extra greenhouse gases, it thickens that kind of blanket. So it traps more of that heat in our outer atmosphere. So just heating up the entire planet. All right, next slide. So what are the main greenhouse gases? Carbon dioxide, mainly through burning fossil fuels, 80% of it in our atmosphere. Methane. Probably heard a lot of commercials recently from energy companies talking about natural gas, American natural gas. Do I know what that is? I mean, it's a marketing term. It could be the gas coming off the sewer pump. It's just a pure marketing term. It's 80 to 90% methane. Yeah. So most of that is released when they're digging, extracting fossil fuels. It gets released into the atmosphere when they're transporting it to the energy companies, to their factories, when they're transporting it out to businesses and homes, and even a little bit in your house, it does get released in methane. And the last one is nitric oxide, mainly through agriculture activities. Takes a lot of energy to create those nitrogen pellets. And then when farmers and homeowners release them into their yard and their fields, a lot of that goes back to the gaseous, gets absorbed back into the atmosphere. So those are the primary greenhouse gases. Next. So earlier in the intro, they mentioned I was a climate reality leader. So Climate Reality is a global organization, and we have agreed to only use scientific data from engineering or scientific companies to share information about climate change. So here in the United States, I only use charts from NASA and NOAA. So on the left there is NASA, and on the right is NOAA. And this is data. It's pure sensor data. Nobody's opinion, nobody's theory, it's just data. So on the left, you'll see the carbon dioxide in our atmosphere, and you can see it bounce around. So if your neighbor, your grumpy uncle said they don't believe in climate change because it changes all the time, I mean, they're right. It changes all the time. You see it going up and down over the years. But look what's happening. This is about 1900. So what happened in the industrialized world about 1900? Became very efficient about digging fossil fuels. They got a lot of companies that started figuring out how to get it out of the ground, extract it, then into factories. 1920s, we got cars, or that we had trains and planes, automobiles were just burning a lot of fossil fuels. So you can see what it's doing to our atmosphere. And again, this percentage carbon dioxide in our atmosphere. On the right, bringing it a little closer to home, what's happening in our lifetime. This is 1960. I was born in 1960. Some of you in the room can add, subtract to that just to see what's happening in your lifetime. And you can see the trend. Next slide. And this is why. Because we just continue to burn and release all of this pollution up into our atmosphere. And it's really hard for organizations, for companies, like we have the EPA here in the United States, and it does try to find companies about burning all this, putting all this pollution in the air. But it's so hard because as soon as they release it, wind comes and it's in the next county, it's in the next state. They don't have a very good success rate at finding companies for just polluting like this. And a lot of other countries don't have any, right? They just burn, it's just open burn. And it's just all this pollution every single day in our atmosphere. It's just adding up over the years. Next. But this is the good news chart. This is United States, and this is our greenhouse gas emissions coming down, believe it or not, in the United States, not globally, but in the United States. In 1992, President George H. Bush was the first president to sign a proclamation acknowledging greenhouse gases and acknowledging climate change. So then the government takes a few years to study and to document things. They have to do that before they create a plan. And they came with a plan about 2000s about things to do, how to monitor. And we shared this with companies. I mean, large companies, they don't want to see their polluters, pictures of them polluting. So they also made technology advances to stop emitting such greenhouse gases. So it's coming down. Next slide. If we stay with the current policy, we think it might come down to here. Next slide. The Inflation Reduction Act was passed in 2020. It offers a lot of incentives to states and to large organizations and to individuals to switch to renewable fuel. So if all those options get exercised, we think it'll come down. And one more slide. But this is where we're supposed to be. This was our United States Paris 2015 Paris Agreement, and this is where we think we'll be, or we should be, in 2030. But I'm hopeful. I mean, that's a good trend, right? So that's definitely better than the other way. So I hope we just might make it. There's more and more incentives. There's more and more technology coming on. There's more and more knowledge. People knowing what to do and what not to do. So this makes me hope. See, it's not all bad news. Next. And this is a temperature. Again, on the left, the chart on NASA chart, and you can see the temperatures, and that's since 1880. So again, your neighbor that doesn't believe in climate change, it's happening all the time. Yeah, it is. But you can see the trend just from the 1960s, again, starting burning all these fossil fuels to now. And 1 degree Celsius and 2 degrees Celsius, a little hard for us, especially as Americans, because we don't use Celsius. And temperatures change, 20 degrees outside of here. So when I think of Celsius change, think of it, the Earth as sensitive to temperature change as your own body is. So if you say we all started at roughly 98 degrees, if your body temperature raises 1 degree Celsius, that's about 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit. So you're getting close to 100. So you're probably not feeling great. I wrote these numbers down. It's a math, but I didn't want to get it wrong. If it's a 1.5 degrees Celsius, that's about a 2.7 degree Fahrenheit temperature, so in your body. So you're really not feeling great, right? And then 2 degrees, that's a 3.6 degree Fahrenheit. So just kind of think of our planet as sensitive to temperature increases as your own body is. If we happen to get to 3 degrees, that's 5.4 degrees Fahrenheit, and then 4 degrees is 7.2 degrees Fahrenheit. So we don't want to go there. And on the right here, just in the United States, since 1901, what the temperature is. Again, this is all data, just data points, NASA and NOAA. Next slide. So 21 of the 22 hottest years have been 2020, well, the 22 since 2002, and it's in order. So 2020 was the hottest year ever on record. Next slide. Hottest of all in the last 9 years. And we have the data, but the Climate Reality Group hasn't updated their charts yet. They will soon. Next slide. 2023 is going to be 2020. Hottest year ever recorded on record. Now, not in the United States, we didn't have the record, but globally, so it's the global temperature hottest ever. So next time you see anybody brief this kind of slide from a Climate Reality project, you'll see 2023 will be first. Next slide. And this is from 2021. I just put this in here to remind you, they had some really prolonged heat waves, especially in Northern Europe at that year, and Northern France. They had a lot of elderly folks die. So you look at the temperatures, they busted up in Northern France, Northern Europe area, and they don't have air conditioning there. They just have never needed it. So a lot of elderly people passed away. I mean, dozens of elderly people passed away that year, just from lack of air conditioning, because it had never been needed in their old, old homes. Now all of a sudden they were just having an extended heat wave. Next slide. So this is our planet. Most of our planet is covered by water, right? Everybody know the rough percentage? About 70%. 70% water, 30% land mass. Water is a great heat sink. It's very good at collecting and holding on to heat, much better than land. Next slide. So most of the extra heat in our atmosphere, where is it going? Yeah, it's going right into our oceans. Next slide. Look at the temperature increase in our oceans just since 1960. And one more slide. So this is just having tremendous impacts on the aquatic creatures and the aquatic, wildlife and plants. I mean, yeah, they're fish, they can move, right? But their food sources may not move, their habitat may not move, where they spawn is not going to move, right? So it's just having really tremendous impacts in our oceans. Next slide. And warmer air, as you know, holds more water vapor. You know that every time you take a shower. Next slide. Each additional 1 degree Celsius, water vapor can increase by 7%. One more slide. They've already measured it at 5% all, on average over top of our oceans. When you have all that extra water vapor in the air, what happens? Next slide. When it rains, you get some really serious downfalls. It just rains a lot harder, a lot more intense, and for a lot longer because all that water vapor is up there just coming down all at once. Next slide. This was in 2022, 9 inches of water in 3 hours. The ground just can't absorb that, so they had a ton of flooding. Next slide. And on the news, you hear all these are 1 in 1,000-year events. Next slide. We've just been having a lot of them in the last couple of years. And next. And flip through that like 5 times. So let's talk about hurricane. So the data shows there's not increase in there are more hurricanes, but the hurricanes that are coming are much more intense. They last longer, they have more water, they're causing more storm surge, and just wreaking more havoc on the cities. Next slide. This is Florida. Go back one. This is in Florida in 2022, and this was a Hurricane Ian, and it ended up being a Category 4, and it got it all. It stayed there for days. It rained, the storm surge, the winds, and you could just see it just destroy this whole team. Exactly. So you would think that all this extra moisture in the air might help the farmers, right? It might help create all this moisture in the air, help it rain more often. However, the same heat in the atmosphere that's pulling up this moisture from the oceans is also pulling up that moisture from our soils. So the top 4 to 6 inches of soil, which is most important to us gardeners, right? That's getting drier because the heat in the atmosphere is pulling up that moisture from the soil. So we're getting actually more droughts than we've had before. Next slide. Particularly out west, they've had some in the last couple of years. So that 90 to 100% droughts in these areas. Next slide. Another feature with every 1 degree Celsius increase in heat, you get more lightning strikes. And when you get more lightning strikes, next slide, you have the dry weather with the dry brush, you get fires. So it's tracking the increase in heat with the increase in fires. Next slide, and it's still if you're a neighbor or grumpy uncle. No, one more is this is California, 2021. So 6 of the 7 fires in California history have occurred since 2020. Now, next slide. There. So if people still don't believe in the climate change, it's causing this damage, haven't talked to anybody that works in the insurance company. Next slide. You can see the difference from 2012 just to 2021, how much insurance companies had to pay out because of fires. Next. And then again, extra heat, and I'll show you a chart later, more of the heat of the temperature differences is seen happening at the North Pole. So all of our ice is at our North and South Pole. So here is Greenland, here's the North Pole. You can see the decline in ice mass. Next. On the other end of the planet, Antarctic, again, amount of ice loss. Next. These are the top 10 cities by risk by population. So most of those are in India. There are risk of sea level rise because of that ice melting. Next. If you flip that by asset, you get Miami and New York in the top of the run, top of the list. And you see that when you go down there, right? You got the skyscrapers right on the edge of the water, both in Miami and New York. Especially Miami's at sea level. If you get a 3 inch increase in sea level rise, it's in the streets. It's not going anywhere. That's sea level. So it's going to be at the bottom of all the buildings. Next. And we are not immune in this area. It's Norfolk, Virginia. We're getting a lot more flooding, the high tide flooding in that area. Next. Here's Northern Carolina. And they had a sea level rise and a storm surge and it took out a couple of houses. Go next, pretty loud. Go next. Stop it. Too loud. And here's just the data points for increased flooding along, and it's a lot on the East Coast. Next. And Virginia and Maryland are right along there. We're gonna have an increase in flooding, a couple inches of sea level rise. So normally, when we have the normal temperatures in our globe, we have this very stable polar vortex around the North Pole, in the south too, but a stronger vortex on the north. So it kind of keeps that cold air circulating when the entire planet heats up. Next slide. It pushes some of that cold air down. So this is why, like last month, when we had that cold snap, this is why it happens, because the heat around the whole planet heats up the North Pole, or that northern pole region, and that cold air has to go somewhere. So it's pushing down into the lower, in our case, the lower states. Next slide. And you hear a lot of people on social media is like, what is this climate warming? It's 20 degrees outside. You see it all the time. So I follow, Dr. Neil deGrasse Tyson. I follow him on Facebook, on social media. Last month he posted this exact same chart that I use. So thank you, Dr. Tyson, explaining that the exact reason that you're having these cold snaps is because of climate change, because it's pushing that cold air down into our lower states. So thank you, Dr. Tyson, for verifying my charts. Go ahead, next. And this is Tennessee. They are just not used to dealing with snow. This was in 2022, and they had 52 people that died, primarily because of car crashes, because they're just not used to dealing with snow. And they have no means to remove snow from the streets. But last month, they also had, like, I think a dozen or so people die, same thing, mostly car crashes, when that snow made it down to Tennessee. Next. And this is just a summary of the extreme weather catastrophes, and you know, this is data. You can see the trend. Next. And if you're, again, your neighbor, grumpy uncle still doesn't believe in climate change, surely they must believe in air pollution. I mean, it's when you're burning that much stuff and putting that much stuff into our atmosphere, you're getting a lot of air pollution. So a lot of particulate matter in the air pollution, along with all the greenhouse gases. So EPA is estimating more than 40% of people in the US live in communities that don't meet the basic air quality standards. Next. And they're finding, as they're learning more about this, they're finding particles, especially in older people and children. They do autopsies. Next. And this just breaks my heart as a young athlete, obviously trying to get healthy, running the track at his school, and just, boy, look what's burning behind him. Next. Next slide. So 2021, I love this chart because it's the strongest statement. Again, 180 countries, and in 2021, they made this statement, and I want to underline indisputable. The first time that many countries stated that absolutely human activity is warming our planet. And I told you later that the temperature differences seems to be a little more in the North Pole area, the northern part of our planet. We can see that difference. And again, this is a NOAA chart. It's just data. It's just facts. Next. But here starts to be the good part, the agriculture. The United Nations says agriculture, plants, and how we do our food, grow food and distribute food is part of the solution. Next. This is their principles. You can click 4 times. They have 4 main principles. Soil health, keep them 4 times. And we'll talk about a few of those just in time. I'm just going to talk about soil health for today, but these are, you can, they put out a lot of information brochures. You can click on the United Nations principles of key generative agriculture. Next. And here are their practices. We're going to talk about a few of these. Definitely going to talk about no-till, cover crops, organic, and compost. All right, next. All right, so what can gardeners do? Every plant you lovingly put in the ground and nurture to health is a step towards healing our planet. And again, it may seem little things you do in your yard, in your community, in your neighborhood, but there are millions of backyard gardeners, millions of us, and collectively, all the plants we put, all the soil we'll take care of, does make a collective difference. So there's three things we're gonna talk about today, and I know, I want you to remember these three things, because I know when I leave a lecture the next day, it's like, that was a great lecture, but what were the points? What did you want me to learn? So these are the three things. We'll have a quiz at the very end. So these are the three things I want to talk about. Go ahead. Do what?
Take a picture.
Oh, you take a picture? You have access later. Number one, take care of the soil. The part of the solution to a healthier planet is like literally beneath our feet. It's our soil. There's a big movement now in regenerative agriculture. It's amazing how important that healthy soil is. I want to call it, there's 5 ingredients for healthy soil, but look at number 3, living organisms. Those are the little microorganisms in one spoonful of healthy soil has 1 billion living organisms in 1 billion. It's amazing. I try to see them. I have a microscope in my study where I look at bugs and diseased plants, but I can't try to. I can't see. We need a very powerful microscope to see this. Those are, and their main purpose in life is to eat like plant roots, anything decayed, anything around the surface, any fruit that comes down, any flowers that come down. They eat that, and they literally poop out nutrients for the next plants, for the plants to absorb. The plants are in that area, and they hold on to carbon dioxide. They can collect carbon dioxide not only from the air, but from the plants and from the roots and everything they eat, and they hold on to it in the soil. So they sequester carbon dioxide in the soil. Very important, living organisms. Next slide. The first part, though, of taking care of your soil is not to damage your soil. These are some pictures from the Library of Congress. Anybody know what this is? Dust Bowl, right? 1930s to 40s. We had some very ambitious American farmers back then. They were given land or very cheap land, sold very cheap land, and they would till, plant, harvest, till, plant, harvest, till, plant, harvest over and over and over again. Never let the ground rest, never put any nutrients back in. Put the same plant in all the time. If they were growing cotton, they would cotton. Beans, you would same thing over and over again. That soil became like baby powder. And then in the 1934, mid 30s, we had this big storm. It just literally blew all that topsoil, baby powder from topsoil, off into the other states around. And this contributed towards the Great Depression. So don't do that. Next slide. Rototiller. I had a rototiller. Anybody else have a rototiller here? I used to do it because it seemed to make sense. You want to break up the soil, so when you put the seeds and young plants in, they have an easier time. But what you're really doing is the healthy soil has all those microorganisms in it. Here's the food web up here. It creates all this fungi and little patterns, organic matter. They spread out, and it creates this great organism, a little food web inside of your garden soil. When you till, you're actually just really chopping all that up and releasing up, and you can lose 60% of the stored carbon in your soil just by tilling. So I still think if you're establishing a new garden, I would go ahead and till to break it up if you want to, if you need to. But once you start putting amendments in there and plants in there and soil in there, then try not to till ever again. Move the soil out of the way and put your new plants in, but keep that soil intact and keep it healthy. It really does protect all those living organisms in there. Just keep them all together. Next. There is a no-till movement across the United States. I don't see Virginia and Maryland and North Carolina much in there, so we need to talk to our local farmers. But I think farmers and homeowners are starting to understand the benefit of healthy soil and not tilling. Next part of keeping healthy soil is mulch and ground cover. Mulch is anything you put on the ground. I mean, Mother Nature was the original one to create mulch, right? We had it in the fall. All the leaves, and that's very natural mulch. You should leave them in place if you can. But any kind of mulch, anything you put on the ground, pine needle, straw, sticks, leaves, anything. Again, it helps protect all those living organisms in the ground from the sun, from the wind, from the heavy rain. It's just to protect it on top of the soil. Ground cover is even better because these are plants, right? So they help pull in carbon dioxide. So mulch is good. Ground cover is even better, something low. This looks like clover to me in an orchard. This was in California. So something on the ground, mulch or ground cover. Next. Also taking care of the soil. Really try not to put synthetic chemicals on the ground. Up until the 1940s, farmers used to use manure to fertilize their fields, right? But if anybody's ever done that, it's really hard to work with manure. It's heavy, it's hard to throw out. So then the government came out with synthetic fertilizers, and they're little pellets and powder, much easier. However, the manufacturing of these synthetic pellets causes like 2% of our emissions, because it takes a lot of heat and a lot of pressure to create those pellets and that fertilizer. And then when they spray and release it, a lot of that gases again get re-released up into the atmosphere and create part of our greenhouse gases. Same thing with synthetic pesticides. Again, these are artificial pesticides. No matter what the manufacturers tell you, they're going to kill all soft-bodied insects. So any bees, butterflies, caterpillars, fireflies, dragonflies, it's going to kill them. It's just, you can't, even some of them that come to your door, like the mosquito joes, and say, oh, this is coming from chrysanthemum flowers, but it is so concentrated by the time they get it to you, it's going to kill all soft-bodied insects. So try to use organic fertilizer if you can, and organic pesticides. There are some organic pesticides, but they're read the ingredients. So it's just, again, the best thing that you can do is have healthy soil and help the plants protect themselves. If you have to, some organic fertilizers and organic pesticides, but read the rules. Thanks. Number two for the things you're going to remember: compost everything. Compost is just any decayed organic material. I've heard a lot of conversation, people complaining in the last 6 months about how much groceries cost. EPA estimates that Americans throw out 40% of what you buy. 40%, and I just checked it for 2023. It was 40%. Just think of your grocery bill, $100, throwing $40 away. Don't throw it in the trash can. Compost if it goes bad. One of the best thing would be to eat it, right? If it goes bad, compost it. You can put compost, you can have bins, you can throw it in a corner. I have the next slide, I'll show you. Go ahead. I have a vermiculture. I have a worm bin in my basement. This is where most of mine goes. There are dynamos at decomposing all your kitchen scraps. So just use that, and compost is great for you. You can throw it anywhere, in the grass, in your planting beds, in your vegetable gardens. It's great for all of it. It helps in the consistency of the soil. It's almost like fertilizer, but it's better because it just helps. It's more, it just helps like a soil amendment almost. So it's even better than fertilizer. So here are the things you need to make compost: carbon, nitrogen, water, and oxygen. And I'll show you the recipe on the next slide. So the best recipe is about 3 parts brown to 1 part green. I'm a pretty lazy gardener. I don't worry about that. Mine's about half and half, but that's it ideal if you want it really fast compost. And there are the brown materials and the green. So brown is anything you think of carbon, anything brown and dry is on the brown side, and green is most of your kitchen scraps. I kind of struggle with getting more brown. I use toilet paper rolls, paper towel rolls, tear up some cardboard if it doesn't have that plastic coating on it. But that's anybody else have any ideas of browns? I mean, I usually struggle to get enough brown. My compost bin. I have a note at the bottom: no animal products, grease or oil. If you are very diligent, if you have a self-contained compost bin, and if you have a thermometer and you're gonna check it daily, you can decompose animal products, oil and grease. It has to be 160 degrees for like several weeks. So if you're very diligent, you can do it. But for the lazy gardeners like myself that like to just throw stuff in, I would not, because you're gonna get visitors. You're gonna get rats and mice and raccoons. Things you probably don't want in your yard. Okay, next. And the last thing is just to plant more plants. That's why we're here today, right? We're gardeners. So there's a green light to go plant more plants. You heard an earlier talk, just get rid of some of that turf in your yard. And if you work on an HOA, some of the turf that in your community, put plants in there, put native ground covers, put small little bushes. You might not have enough places for trees, but something native. Ground covers is just the same as turf, just about, especially when you're just driving along the roads in your neighborhoods. But not only do they absorb carbon dioxide, but then they give you oxygen for free. Plants have been doing this for millions of years, so there should be the #1 defense against climate change. It's just planting more plants, get rid of all these acres of turf of nothing that we keep having to mow, and it really doesn't have a great environmental benefit. A little bit, I mean, it's covering the ground, it's stopping some erosion, but it doesn't host a lot of native insects, and it doesn't really provide a lot back to the environment. Next. Since this is a native plant conference, plant native plants. You saw the video from Doug telling me earlier. So there's a quote from him. We are losing 1 to 2% of our insects every year. And that's because they had nothing to eat. They did a study, I think they mentioned it in the video, that most like homeowners, most neighborhoods, 80% of the plants that you put in your yard are foreign. 80%. So that means the pollinators only have 20% of something to eat in your yard. So they're starving. They have no place to eat. They have no place or habitat to raise their young. So we should flip that. It needs to be 70 to 80% native in your neighborhoods, in your yard, your communities, to support our native wildlife and especially our native birds. Next. This is a hardiness zone that USDA puts out every year. They just released this one last month. Because of climate change, they're changing. Virginia used to be pretty solid, 7A, 7B. Now the bottom of Virginia is creeping up into the 8. That's in North Carolina area. So some of the plants that were native here, now plants that were native to North Carolina may be surviving in our area, and the plants that were in Northern Virginia may be moving into West Virginia, New York, or further north. And there's impacts to that on the next slide. So something that would normally bloom, say, in June here because of climate change may start blooming earlier. Well, the pollinators that usually come up and need that, they may not be here yet, right? Because the plant has bloomed earlier because of climate change. And then just the opposite can happen. The pollinators that are migrating because of climate change, they might get here early and that plant it hasn't bloomed yet, not ready. So we really need to plant a wide diversity of native plants, and the native plant colonies that the other speaker talked about, to try to get them to support each other so we can, have enough food for our pollinators. And also, anybody have these in their yard, in the neighborhood? They're beautiful, but they eat native plants because they're native, right? They've been here for thousands of years. So what's their favorite plants? Most of our native plants. Right? So that's just more pressure on our native plants. It's even more important that we really focus on only planting native plants in our yard, in our communities. And there's the 70% down there, 70 to 80. 70 is like the minimum. You have 70% native plants in your yard. It allows a healthy ecosystem to support native wildlife in your yard, your community, and your neighborhood. And the last part of planting more plants is grow your own food. This is a poster, again, from the Library of Congress, and they were trying to get everyone to call them victory gardens. And this is from World War I, World War II, when the United States was shipping a lot of food overseas to our troops, so to make sure that people here back here at home weren't starving. So they really encouraged everyone to have their own garden and their own backyard, and schools and churches and community centers. They were handing out free seeds, getting out free information about how to plant gardens. A lot of the carbon dioxide emissions in our community are because of transportation. A lot of that is food coming from other countries, coming across the country. You going to the store to get it, you bring it home. If you plant something in your backyard and you walk out back and pick it and eat it, not only is it healthier for you, it's healthier for our planet. So it works both ways. And you know exactly how that plant was grown, that those vegetables, you know what was or was not sprayed on it. You know the soil, so it's just so much healthier for you as individuals and for our planet. So grow your own food. And next. So summary, gardeners are the stewards and guardians of our precious soil. Again, there's more and more. I see a lot more classes on regenerative agriculture. There's a lot more about how important that healthy soil is. So I'd encourage you to take some classes on that. Maintaining healthy soil, planting native plants, and growing your own vegetables is absolutely a positive solution towards addressing our climate challenge. And gardeners, overall, all of you can significantly decrease humanity's carbon footprint on our planet. Next slide, I have some resource. Oh, one more. What you can do. So educate now. You've been to this conference, you learned a lot. Educate your family. I don't think people talk about it enough. I know it's a big global problem, but we need to talk about it because there are things each and every one of us can do. Use your vote. Oh, that one. Yeah. I think we're missing one. Use your vote. So the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, it had some significant positive impacts on reducing our greenhouse emissions. So careful who you vote for, and again, but also tell your representative and federal subsidies for fossil fuel companies, they are still getting $15 billion a year of your taxpayer dollars. The energy companies are some of the most successful companies in America. They do not need subsidies. I give Congress some credit. They have been decreasing that over the years, but still, $15 billion a year, really, in your taxpayer dollars. So tell your local rep. Use your choices. So here's the 3 things we talked about today. Here's your quiz. Number 1 is take care of the soil. 2, compost everything. And 3, plant more plants, especially native plants. So act like your plant depends on your actions because because it does. Anybody know this photograph? It's taken from Apollo in 1972, from one of the NASA missions. And it's like the first time that I think that human beings saw our planet in the black background of space. This became a very popular poster. They put it on Post-it stamps. I remember seeing this in school back when I was in school. We really need to help take care of the planet. We don't have a planet B yet. Elon Musk is working on it, but we don't have it yet. So we need to take care of this planet. Next, yeah, one more. Yeah, some references for you. I wrote a book on backyard gardeners and climate change. It's funny, I talked about how there's millions of gardeners all over the place. A couple months ago, I got an order for 50 books from India. I don't know anyone in India. It's probably a gardening club or a book club, and everyone just wants to know little things that they can do to help this issue. Here's some websites that I use every week. So if people call and ask questions. So Master Gardeners, Department of Conservation and Recreation. Audubon at Home, they have a great, you can log on here and they have a color brochure you can download for free. Climate Reality Project, if you want to join me in learning more about climate, the impacts to our climate and how to educate others. The Plant Society, and this is a new one I just put in here last month. Climate Change Tree Atlas. So if you're involved in a reforestation effort and you want to know what kind of trees might react the most to climate change, you can log on to that and check. Thank you very much. Any questions? I think we got some time.
Okay, now we're gonna do the Q&A. We've got one question from Chris, who is online. He's saying, I'm wondering what the effect of freezing my vegetative compostables is if I can't take them out that day.
Oh, that's fine. Just put them out whenever, yeah. Freezing your vegetables that is no impact to them decaying later on. I mean, it's good that you can just throw them out in the yard and let them free. You cannot hear me?
No, I probably can.
Okay. You can, even though it's freezing outside, you can still put them outside. I mean, they will decay much, much slower, but they will still decay. Okay.
Anyone else?
Do you have can you give us a rough estimate of what percentage of the carbon budget could be sequestered by improving agricultural practices? Talking about 10%, 30%?
Yeah.
I've seen that number, but it doesn't come to
it's
mind.
like 30–40%. It's a lot. I mean, if we start, instead of knocking down all of our forests, we get planting forests.
Right,
If we start, if everyone's,
sure.
if we get
It's
rid of all this
deforestation,
stuff,
stop deforestation.
that's the most important thing first. I mean,
We gotta keep our trees.
Amazon are knocking down a football field a day, so it's like crazy. Stop that. But yeah, it's like 30–40%. It's huge.
Going into the soil.
It's huge. Yeah. So that's a big, I mean, again, all this flat land and all this turf, we just need to get rid of. We need plants. We need plants in the ground. We need healthy soil.
If you want to compost, if you just like vegetable peelings or, apple cores, can you just like throw them in your garden area?
You can bury them in summertime when I have an active growing garden. I just keep a trowel next to in the garden bed, and if I bring something out like an apple peel, so I just bury it right there. Yeah, so you can bury right in active dirt. That's fine.
Can we know the reason behind the decline in the US?
as I said earlier, there's been a lot of one-to-one monitoring, so a lot of companies weren't even aware of the emissions they had. So there's a lot of technology advances, scrubbers and things like that, and just different procedures, so they just don't release. Before it was like, no impact, I'll just dump this in the air. So just people more awareness and more procedure differences, and the decrease for the United States is a lot of people are moving to renewable energy.
So it's not just like offshore, like manufacturing somewhere else, so we're just taking our.
No, I'm not sure.
That would have been earlier.
That would have been earlier, right? Yeah, I mean, that happened, you know, before, yeah. Yes, sir.
I was curious, you said 2020 was one of the hottest years.
Yep.
Wasn't that during the pandemic and everybody was parked basically? I mean, I know when I was going to work, like most vehicles were parked and that was worldwide.
Yeah,
I
so,
was curious.
so car emissions are a part of a big part. I mean, it's trying, there was still a lot of shipping, there was still a lot of, you know, coal power plants around, there's just still a lot of burning of fossil fuels that were still going on. And it's a community that probably happened in 2021, a lot of that burning, so it just takes the time to average out and for the heat to rise. So yes, we noticed a big difference in the cleanliness of our air in 2020 during the pandemic, but still there's just a lot of third world countries are still creating more energy factories and more energy companies and are burning coal, you know, and so it's just a lot going on that's hopefully switching over time. And as you saw, the United States came down, but the globe did not. The globe is still rising. We're at 1.1. We were not there, you know, 2 years ago. So globally, we're still on the way up, even though the United States has taken a lot of technology measures to try to bring theirs back down. And the United States is the #1 polluter per capita. China's #1, but they're 4 times the population of the US. We are per capita per person, we are the biggest polluters. So we bring ours down to even impact the world.
Can you say a few words again about why native plants can help mitigate climate change? Because what I heard was plants can mitigate climate change, and one of the things we struggle with a lot in local policy is, you know, when you have reforestation efforts undertaken by the county to combat climate change, there's this debate about, well, should all the trees be native?
Yeah.
And, you know, you hear a lot, well, you know, some non-native trees do better in certain situations. And I'm trying to get a handle on how strong is the argument that native plants are more resilient, and that native plants are better for addressing climate change than non-native plants.
On the science level, it's a plant. The benefit of native plants is the health of the environment and the community, the diversity, the biodiversity, and that the native plants are more less maintenance required, they'll last year longer, they're healthier, they create better root system. So it's more of an environmental reason, and it creates just a cleaner environment and a healthier environment, and then you keep the native insects and the birds. So it's, again, it's more of an environmental argument, but it does, you know, the better, the longer you can keep plants healthy and alive, then more you're helping the environment. So on a science level, it's probably not, you know, a leaf is a leaf, it's going to do that transposition, going to bring in, you know, carbon dioxide and oxygen, but it's just an environmental biodiversity is really the main argument for more native plants. Yeah.
Does the native plants actually better the soil more so than non-native plants?
Yes, it's better, better for the soil, it's a more stable, native plants have much more root system, a lot of other plants are not used to the soil, so our, you know, our junior clay
All those
soil.
little insects and everything.
Yeah,
in the soil.
exactly, and then the relationship they have with healthy soil is better for native plants, because again, they've been here, they've been in the soil for thousands of years. So it's an environmental kind of argument, it's a healthier environment.
So you're saying about not tilling, but if you're doing planting, like I would always break up the soil around where I was gonna plant.
Yeah.
Should I just be digging the hole and putting it in and not breaking up the soil?
I break things up to make a hole to put stuff in and put it back, but it's just the chopping motion and the all of a sudden lifting all that air up, that soil up into the air. So minimize your disturbance of the soil as much as you can. I think I've seen some farmers now, they have those like slice cutters now that they have these disc and they just roll on the side and they stick the seeds in there, so they're not chopping up the soil. So it's just different kind of methods. Again, the least you can disturb the soil, the better. Anything else? All right, well, thank you all very much. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.